Welcome to Fall, Rise, Give, a space where we invite you to dig into the real cause of your suffering, looking at opportunities for growth with a change in your beliefs, thoughts, and actions so you can be your true self and be inspired. Join us as we explore life's ups and downs and navigate the twists and turns, sharing stories of resilience, hope, and the transformative power of giving back. Whether you're looking for a change, in recovery, or simply seeking inspiration, this podcast is your go-to for candid conversations, raw emotions, and a whole lot of heart. Tune in and discover how to fall, rise, and give back on life's extraordinary journey. Fall, Rise, Give, turning struggles into opportunities by being your true self and help others. I was going to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of the day that you happen to be listening to the program. Thanks for joining us once again. I'm Bartender Bob. That right there, that's Kumar. Kumar, did you have a good week?
I did. I had a great week of work, which was crazy for me because I've been in the fire, as I call it. I've been to the lion's den. I had to present for 2 hours to the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, which kind of is nerve-wracking because he's a really smart guy. He was pretty high up in Amazon, and he's just a brilliant guy, and he had a lot of questions, but it went all well, so I'm happy. I had a good week, and now I'm in Seaside, Oregon, calling you from there.
So you're gone again, man. Do you ever sit still?
No. I try to go out every couple of weeks to go some little town somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, or as we saw, I went to Europe this summer, but not really much of a European guy, but Pacific Northwest is a great time in the summertime to get out there, visit these little villages and little towns.
Right. So, a lot of times we're talking about, the good things that happen in our lives and whatnot, but our podcast is called Fall, Rise, Give. And, the fall oftentimes is, people think about failure when you fall. And, I think about sometimes when I've had failures, and then I think about the failures that I've had and how they've led to positive things in my life. First time I got let go from a radio station, I'm like, oh, what the hell? This is the worst thing. And then it led to something. It led to me doing a talk show at another radio station. I got let go from that one, and that led me to become, a bartender and to be a podcaster. I got divorced, and that led me to a beautiful life with Monique. And I start thinking about the things that I failed at, and then I think that those failures have led to something that's that's better, that leads me to the life, the true life, the true self that I truly am today. And I was thinking about that, and I thought, there's a guy that I know, and I would consider him a friend more than an acquaintance, because I've had the opportunity to talk with him multiple times. I've interviewed him for my last podcast that I used to do. It was called BS with Bob Schmidt, and I actually did improv with him. He's a great guy. He's a triathlete. He's a former owner of a multi-million-dollar successful marketing firm, and an author of at least one book that I know of called Celebrating Failure. Ralph Heath from La Crosse, Wisconsin is our guest this time around, Kumar.
Welcome, Ralph. I'm really excited to have you here, and I know you've done a lot of great things, and triathlete is pretty amazing. I've done one triathlon in my life, and that was probably the last one that I'm going to do.
I know that feeling. Well, it's good to be here, and thanks for having me on.
So, have you done any triathlons in the last decade or so, Ralph?
I have not. I kind of evolved into bike racing, and my mother always used to tell me that I was going to wear out my knees, and I always laughed at her as I went out the door. But it turns out she's right, and so running is kind of problematic for me now, but I love to bike.
Right. Tell me about the reason why you wrote your book called Celebrating Failure, because I know when I first heard about it, I'm like, who wants to celebrate losing or being, not good at something?
That's what my publisher said too. I had multiple experiences, much like you guys just alluded to. And I started at maybe a younger age. Not intentionally. I was a little kid and we were playing with matches, and I burned down the house that was being built next door to ours. And I thought my dad would have me. He thought that I was going to be put in juvenile detention.
Right.
And we both did. But he he did just the opposite. He was very, I know you can do better than this. I know you're capable of greater things. And he just made a lasting impression on me that way. And I've tried to carry that forward. And they're all kind of related, what you were talking about. You fail at something and you, rather than burying it, at the agency that I started, we started holding it up to the light and learning from it. And if you do that, you can learn incredible things and improve. It's especially true in marketing. I had a direct marketing agency, and so you analyze every little response that you get, and you realize that if you just tweak something, a headline or a body copy or an offer, that you can go from failure to success. And it was just a confluence of all kinds of good things like that.
Ralph, how did you learn how to do that?
Well, I think by fire. I mean, as I think back on it, I'll give you an example. I was elected captain of the swim team at the beginning of the season. We had a meeting and I won. And the head coach wasn't there, but he came the next day and he called me into his office and he said, "I can't believe that they elected you captain." So, thanks, coach. I've always had a fondness for you too. But he had developed one of the swimmers on the swim team since the kid was 5 years old. Mm-hmm. And he was a state champion, incredible swimmer. And I was an average, mediocre, middle of the pack kind of guy. But for all his swimming attributes, he wasn't considered by the team a leader. And hence they voted me. Anyway, long story short, he held another election that I didn't attend, and he switched the captains, and I was out and the other guy was in. And I thought so hard about quitting. I was like, I would just love to tell this guy to stick it where the sun never shines. Right. And I didn't. And I stayed with it. And I had like the greatest swim season of my life. And if I would have quit, I would have missed on that. So you just, those kinds of setbacks keep happening. And you learn they're not the end of the world, that you react and adjust and learn from it and move on. I had a lot of those.
How do you develop the mindset to look past some of these things? Because I know a lot of times, like I said in the beginning, I lost a radio job, and I'm thinking, this is the end of the world, and what can possibly happen to make me get over this and to help me onto the next thing. And I was able to, but how do you develop the skills to look past the things that have throttled you and pulled you back down in order to get ahead in life?
I think it comes from those events, those failures repeating, and you fighting through them and coming out stronger on the other side, and they keep happening, and you keep having to fight through it and adjust, and you just get better and better at it. One of our biggest clients when we first started, it was just a runaway success story. He went from 0 to $100 million in 7 years. And he attracted a lot of national attention from my competitors, the biggest agencies in the business. And I'm this small little startup in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And they were coming to La Crosse and taking them out and wining and dining them and flying them to New York and showing them their facilities. And he kept imparting on me that I had to improve. I had to find better talent. I had to have better creative, better photography, better copy. And at one point he fired me. He said, I'm sorry. I'm going with this New York agency, a Chicago agency. He said, I'll tell you what, we had become good friends. He said, I'll take you down there with me, and we'll tell them that you're in fashion or something, And you can see how the big boys do it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I every bone in my body wanted to tell him to stick it in his ear.
I'm sure ear wasn't the word you were looking for either.
Yeah, it wasn't the first one. I mean, can you imagine the 30 seconds of satisfaction I would have had, all the work I put into this and you fire me, but I
Right.
didn't do it. I stuck with it and I learned a lot. Anyway, it turns out they had great creative, but they didn't have good people skills. And he fired them 30 days later and hired me back.
Oh, wow.
And again, it was another fabulous story that I took in. And I think when you keep getting rejected like that, and you get a lot of it when you work at an ad agency, you get good at handling it. And I hope these days that society isn't so protective of young people that they're not letting them mess up.
I fear that that's probably the problem, because you look at kids nowadays, a lot of them anyway, and they don't know how to deal with rejection. They don't know how to deal with face to face, or they don't know how to talk to people without having this in front, having their phone in front of them,
Yeah.
or without texting it to somebody. I work at a bar and I see people sitting there next to each other on a supposed date, yet they're both on their phones doing something completely different. I kind of want to interject Kumar into this. I mean, Kumar's had the opportunity when he was younger. He actually started a food company that a bigger company wanted to buy up, and Kumar had the opportunity to basically tell those guys to, like you said, stick it in your ear. Kumar, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Ralph. What you're saying totally resonates with me, and I think in humanity, and I think in any successful person, resiliency is the key, and it's hard. I read three books fell off the shelf when I graduated from college in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. One of them was called Unlimited Power by Anthony Robbins. The second was called Art of Visualization. And the third one was like Healing the Shame That Binds You. I had a lot of shame not living up to my parents' expectations, being an immigrant. My dad was a PhD professor at University of Minnesota. And I had a struggle internally. So I started to heal some of that shame and started to get motivated. And I ran a marathon in the early 90s. I did pretty well with that, and I ended up starting a food company through the help of some professors who mentored me out of Eau Claire. And long story short, a couple of years into it, I ran into some manufacturing problems, and I met this guy who was the COO of Schwann's Food Corporation. And then from there, I went to the executive board, and I presented this food company idea, and I had all this customers that were selling my food into corporate cafeterias, college campuses, University of Minnesota. And so I had a market. I had already tested the market, and it was working, but I wasn't at the scale that these guys were. Schwann's was a multi-billion-dollar privately held company, and they essentially wanted to buy the company. And then they stuck me in a Asian food division out of Houston, Texas. And the guy was a hardcore, traditional Asian guy. He negotiated himself into a great deal and basically gave me a job with back in the day, would have been good money, but it was like $85,000, and I would get like 0.4% of the sales revenue. And so basically it was a job with the commissions on it. And I had some mentors, and basically the internet was starting to happen at the time, and I just said, this is not going to work out. They put me in this place, and I basically told them to shove it in a very nice way. And I sent a copy of my letter, not only to this guy, but to the whole board that I knew. And then immediately one of his underpinnings called me and said, I can't believe you did that. I'm like, you know what? I don't think this is going to work out. I just had a feeling that the way you guys have treated me, it's not going to work out. So that was a huge failure. I ended up shutting the company down. And I ended up talking to my mom and my family, and I ended up getting a job in the technology. But I always had in the back of my mind that I was going to start another company. And long and behold, I stayed in the corporate job for 3 years, moved to Seattle, and I started an internet company. And you talk about marketing and all this stuff, direct marketing with search ads and all the stuff that's out there now today. But I started an internet company, kind of a small search engine. We raised some venture funding. We ended up selling it, made a few $1 million for the executive teams and for our investors. And yeah, so the biggest failure that I had at that age, I had to basically put my head between my legs and walk away from my family and investors. The first food company, and ended up starting an internet company just 4 or 5 years down the road. And so, yeah, what you said about failure, I totally believe. And I think Anthony Robbins says, the more you fail, if you learn from it, the more successful you're going to be. Because if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. So I'm a totally huge fan of what you're saying, Rolf. So I appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to struggle, particularly at an ad agency, to get people to understand that it's okay if they fail. It's not only okay, but it's expected and anticipated, and you're not going to lose your job. I had a guy that was really close and instrumental in the company who used to say, this is the only place I've ever worked where you can be fired by a client and come to work the next day. But it's hard to create that kind of atmosphere. I don't know if you watched some of the Senate hearings that went on the Secret Service just after this recent assassination attempt. But there were two senators screaming at the Secret Service that they have to fire somebody immediately. And there's probably, I don't know who they were or how it turned out, but there's probably no one who better understands what went wrong with that problem than the guys that they wanted to fire. And it's crazy not to tap into that knowledge and, okay, so what did you do wrong? What would you change? How could you do it differently? And it's got to be accepting. It can't be you're fired. Or it can, but you're missing just an incredible learning opportunity.
In the modern day, Rolf, and I don't know how much you've kept up with the forward thinking of internet marketing and digital marketing, but you probably have. We do a lot of things called A/B tests, right? On treatments of things, and like you said, we tweak the headline a little bit, we tweak a little graphic here and there, and we test these things. And the biggest thing, one of my old bosses used to tell me is like, I don't care what the failure is. I want to know is how can we iterate on it? What can we learn? It's all about the learnings. And so that's exactly what you're saying. And so, especially in marketing, digital marketing or direct marketing in the old days, it's all about learning, right? And so you're right. The Secret Service guys, they learned the best and they had the most knowledge. They were the most qualified to lead in the future, right?
Right.
Ralph, have you done any new iterations on your book? Have you taken the failure model to the next level at all?
Not really. I'm working on another book, but it's more about listening positively. Some people listen so... I have the opposite problem, by the way, but some people listen so negatively that they don't hear what's being said. And the person that you're trying to convince or talk to or whatever, they're sending cell signals. And I mean, sometimes they're outwardly saying yes, but people are so accustomed to not listening for the yes and amplifying that thought that they don't hear the message. So that's kind of my next project. I've got it written. It just needs to be organized into a coherent message.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because I know that Kumar wants to write a book. And that's originally how this whole podcast started, was that Kumar wanted to write a book about his path to sobriety. And that's kind of how we ended up with Fall, Rise, Give. What kind of things do you do in order to, to put those thoughts to paper, and then paper to organization, then organization to book form?
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting question. And I think it can go lots of different ways. I wrote it just by, I would have some really interesting experience at work, good and bad, during the day. And I would come home and develop the story for a week. And I wrote it over about a 12-year period and turned it into the book. But I've been doing the same thing the past 10 years since the last one came out. And then for some reason, I had it in my head that I needed a publisher and I needed an agent. I'm not sure I share those same feelings today. But I found a publisher and an agent from different contexts and mentors that I had developed at the agency, and they introduced me to the people, and so it worked out well. I'm just not sure if I did it a second time, if I would go back or if I would self-publish. You do give up a big chunk of revenue when you have an agent and a publisher.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I actually wrote a book, Rolf, on internet marketing back in 2005, somewhere 2007, somewhere in there. And I blogged for a year. And I basically took a bunch of blogs that I wrote and I organized them into a thing. And I called it Marketing is a Contact Sport. And essentially, it's all about kind of what you're talking about, direct marketing through blogs, search, and social media was just happening. And so I self-published it through Amazon, and I'm going the other way. And one of the things I've learned in the nonfiction world is that you need to have a platform to go publicize and promote your book. And so I developed a podcast. I had the idea for the podcast from a friend of mine, and I knew Bob was doing this. So I contacted Bob to kind of build a platform a little bit so we can start promoting the podcast. And it takes a while, as you know, to promote and to get out there. And so yeah, so that's interesting that you're actually going down the self-publishing route. I know that through Amazon, I mean, they made it so easy today to publish a book. Have you looked into it at all recently?
I've a little bit looked into it, and I haven't really decided. I'm just more open to it now than I was then. But it sounds like we've led parallel lives.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's interesting for the triathlon and the running, and I don't run anymore either because of my knees. But let me ask you, what's been the biggest struggle in your life, Rolf? And what did you do about it? And what's the gift that you can share with others on it?
well, full disclosure, I think I've led a charmed life. Um, I've just been in the right place at the right time. I mean, I try and enhance that. I think it's important that you have to, one of the things I always tell myself is never miss an opportunity to present your company or your whatever in front of other people. And so I've always tried to maintain a level of visibility. And I think when you do that, good things happen. But I don't have a dramatic, huge event in my past that spoke to me. It's all been pretty good, and I'm grateful. I'm not, I couldn't be happier. But I got to be honest.
That's awesome. And you still wrote about failure, and you still talked about
Yeah.
succeeding through failure. And so that's still very interesting.
Do you think it falls on luck though, Ralph, or do you think that's just you see the opportunity and you take things in more than other people? Because I know that when I've talked to other people, they say that they're quote lucky or whatever, but I think that you put in the steps in order to have that luck happen for you, rather than just it didn't really fall in your lap. You worked hard in order to get that opportunity that caused you the quote unquote luck.
Yes. You're absolutely right. Um, that company that I started working with, I was introduced to them from some other people who I had done some work for, and they recommended me. And it's a whole series of positive events that land you in front of someone who has an idea to start $100 million company, and he taps you as the ad agency. But I can't, it's hard for me to say part of it wasn't being in the right place at the right time and doing the right things. But I hear what you're saying. I also did lots of things to put myself in that position, and then I got lucky.
Well, the way that you and I personally know each other, besides the radio interviews we did when I was on the radio, is I was part of an improv group and we did improv play, and you ended up showing up, and we were able to get to know each other a little bit better doing that. And the sound of your new book that you're doing about the listening positively, that kind of falls back on the whole improv thing that we used to do with the answering a question yes and instead of yes but. And I mean, is that kind of how your new book is taking place, is because of the, maybe in the back of your head that's part of the training that we learned when we were doing improv?
Yeah, you're right on again. I've given that book now to, I bet, 10 people. And I give it to somebody when I'm part of a group that's trying to change something or present something, and they have such a negative perception sometimes, or they don't know how to play as a team. And that book is so instrumental in leading you to teamwork and working as a unit to accomplish something. I love that class that we took, and the group has not formed to the best of my knowledge, but if there was one available every Monday night at 6:00, I'd be there if I didn't have a bike ride schedule.
Right. Kumar, have you ever done any improv at all?
I have not. The closest thing I've done is Toastmasters. And so they have these table topics where they ask you about a particular topic and you speak for, 2 minutes on that. They just ad hoc go around the table and ask for a topic of the day, and then you speak on it for 2 minutes. I think it's great. I think it's awesome. What's the name of the book that you're talking about, Ralph?
Yes, and if you just Google "yes and," you'll find it. And
That's great.
I think there are several iterations of it out there.
No, it's funny that you mentioned that. When I talk about communication, and I notice it almost always, I would work for a big analyst firm, my first corporate job before I started the internet company, and they trained us on selling to executives. And so we went through 12 weeks of classroom training on how to communicate effectively. And they told us to look out for the word but, however, and things like that would negate everything else that you just said. You just said a whole bunch of statements, and you said but. That means you're not really agreeing with someone. And so they told us, and they focus on the word and. Almost always say, yes, I think you're saying blah, 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 and I may have a different opinion, X, Y, Z. Instead of negating what they're saying with the word but or however, you're basically building a connection with other people. And that's what active learning or active listening is kind of part of it as well, right? That's how you communicate. You let them finish. You say, I hear you. I may not agree, and here's the way I'm thinking about such a situation.
Yeah. You captured the essence of the book.
That's funny. Yeah, that's awesome. Ralph, what do you want to be known for? What's your message to our listeners, or anybody in general, that people that come into contact with you? What do you want to be known for, or what's your message to the general public out there that's listening to this podcast?
I guess I was so busy running that company with 50 employees that I felt a little guilty often about not giving back to the community. And so I've tried to, since I retired 10 years ago, I've been doing both the book, and I've been trying to give back. I'm the executive in residence at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, and I have an opportunity to work with young entrepreneurs who have ideas about starting their own business. So I sit down with them. It's nice. I love doing that as a business, but you had to work so darn hard at finding them, keeping them, and then hiring people to manage the whole thing. This is nice. I can just talk to them. I can be helpful, and then my income isn't dependent on their existence. So,
right.
I've really enjoyed that.
Question based on your, being in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and having a multi-million-dollar marketing firm out of La Crosse, Wisconsin, where you mentioned that your competitors were in Chicago, New York, Minneapolis,
right.
Even like Seattle and San Francisco. How did you feel, or why didn't you bring your marketing firm to one of the larger communities that was out there rather than keeping it in a small town of 50,000 people? like lacrosse.
We were aware of that problem early on. That you would be the Hicks from the sticks, if you will, that kind of thinking. But we embraced that, our location, and made it a positive. We said we're this small agency in La Crosse, Wisconsin. It's got these incredible recreational opportunities that attracts people to the area. And we do one thing. We do direct marketing. We specialize in it. We're good at it. You probably have an agency that does everything, all things to all people, and it worked. And you have to go after clients that, for example, we told a health story that that resonated with people, and you make it part of your identity. You promote health among your employees, so you attract healthy employees. You attract clients who are health oriented or into outdoor recreation, and you're specializing, and you just get all of those things working for you.
Is the copy of your books, Celebrating Failure, is that still available?
Yes. Yeah.
How does somebody go? Okay, Amazon is a way to find it.
Yeah.
So how have you gained from your failures in the past, Ralph?
I think, when it first occurred to me, I think it was in the office, and over there would be a repeat, that when we would win new clients and things would be going really well, that disaster was about to strike. Somebody was poaching our clients or figuring out how to do what we do, only they were figuring out how to do it better. And every time we were in chaos, we would be extremely profitable. And we concluded that you have to be out there trying stuff. You have to be out there taking risks. You got to start new. We started a photography studio. We started, my engineers, software people invented a way to do Zoom before Zoom was on the market. They just figured out a way to jury rig it.
Right.
And why I didn't start Zoom is the $1 million question. But you realize that you have to be in chaos. You have to keep moving forward, trying new stuff, hiring new people, diversifying. And that's how you grow. And that's when good things happen. And when you start playing it safe, how did Blockbuster not invent Netflix?
Right.
You get so fat and sassy that you don't want to rock the boat, You think, everything's great, so I'm not going to change anything. And that's when you go under.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that take chances, basically. I mean,
absolutely.
If you take chances, then you're going to find something and succeed with it. Kumar, do you have anything else?
It's a great message that you have. I think we resonate a lot with each other, and I really appreciate what you're saying. Resiliency, taking chances, and going after what you believe in, creating something out of the chaos. I think when you're down, you're trying harder. And when you're up, you're kind of sitting on your laurels a little bit. So I think that's the key, is how do you maintain that? And I think that's what Jeff Bezos did. He constantly reminded his people, like, what could go wrong, what could fail at Amazon. And so that's what I think you have to do to create that next Netflix out of Blockbuster. Those guys Netflix went up to Blockbuster and said, hey, we'd love to partner with you. And they laughed at him.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting story. And so I think life is full of failures. Same with Xerox and Kodak and a lot of these guys. They could have been on top of this digital stuff. But it's a fascinating story, Ralph. I hope we stay in touch, and really appreciate you being on here today.
Yeah, my pleasure. I enjoyed it.
The book is called Celebrating Failure. You can find it on Amazon. Ralph Heath is the author of it. If anybody that's listening right now is struggling, with alcoholism or, with dependency on chemicals and whatnot, AA.org is the place to go in order to find out, your first step.
Just one more thing, the activity of giving back. So the book is called Fall and Rise. We talked about fall and how to rise and how to learn. But you're finding happiness in life now through giving. That's fascinating. That's how you're becoming your true self. So you're actually living the theme of the book and the book and the podcast that we have in place. And so, yeah, that's amazing. I think that's what I've learned. One of my friends is a construction expert for people that build homes that are $20-30 million. He works with these billionaires, and he said they're totally unhappy unless they start giving away their money. And when they start giving away their money, when they start giving back to society, that's when they start to feel fulfilled and become their true self. So thanks, Ralph, again. But I just wanted to say that you're living the example of the book by giving back to the community and those students in La Crosse, Wisconsin.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Fall, Rise, Give, where we explore stories of resilience, growth, and giving back. If you enjoyed today's episode, please visit our website at www.fallrisegive.com. Also, consider subscribing to our podcast on your favorite platform and leaving us a review. Your feedback helps us to continue to bring you inspiring stories. Stay tuned for our next episode, and remember, every fall is a chance to rise, and every rise is an opportunity to give. Until next time, keep falling, rising, and giving. This is Fall, Rise, Give, produced by podcastforhire.com. Thank you for listening.